It's recording now. All right. So then the next section is that there's a whole dictionary with 140,000 words in Sanskrit. So if there's any word that you run into in a discourse that isn't explained in as much detail as you'd like, you can click here and see what the meaning of that is. And that's, just a powerful tool. But the thing that I find most interesting and exciting is the search tool. And we'll be doing a lot with that tonight. And you put in a particular word or a phrase up here, and then you click find it, and then it'll show you, and I'll show you what that's like. And then there's a lot of ways you can search. You can put in one word, or you can put in two words that are together, or you can say show words that yoga and sadhana that are within 5 words of each other. And or you can use a wildcard, meaning you can search on the word dharma. So any word that has dharma in it, you'll find that. And then I'll just take an example. People give me one particular word, and now you're interested in me just doing a little search on.
Revolution.
Revolution. Okay. Let's see whether there's any references to revolution. Okay. Fine. All right. So there's 439 matches in 72 documents. And down the side here, these are all the documents and how many places the word shows up. And you see on the first, it's showing me the victory banner of revolution right here. That's the first one. And you see where it says search context, previous page, next page. Below it, it says show 50 words around text messages. You can make it, you can go down all the way down to 10 or all the way up to 50. And this is, you play around with it yourself, but it's very helpful to have more, because then you get a much better sense of what Sarkar was talking about and see whether you really want to explore it in greater depth. And then, of course, you can then use these navigation keys up here. You see the little arrows and the small arrows forward and backwards. And I think this one takes to the next document, and this takes the next place where it's listed. So if you click on particular, okay, that took me to the very last one. And you can see, again, it shows you where it was published. So you can see how many references there are to revolution. And if you do the search find, what you'll get is one large document. This document right here has all of the discourses. You probably have to go on to the second page, combined into one document. And I found that very helpful, and I'll be showing you how I did use that. I would copy these sections and put them into a document and save that document as the keywords on revolution by PR Sarkar. And then people can then go look at it and have a good feeling of where they wanted to look in more detail. So what I want to do now is, before I go into looking how did I use this to explore racism and casteism, I want to do a little exercise using Menti, because I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here we go. Share. Right, stop sharing. Okay. All right. I'm going to pull up a document here. All right. Okay. Are you seeing on the screen? I'll put into the chat a link. Okay, so do you see that there's a link to menti.com in your chat? Are you seeing that? So click on that link and it should take you to this page. And I've set it up so that you can enter in up to 3 words or phrases. But these are the instructions, that understanding PR Sarkar's mission had 2 goals. One was self-realization, and the second goal was service to humanity. And so from that framework, before we explore casteism and racism, I want to be thinking about, well, how does racism and casteism affect the goal of self-realization? And what are some of the key words around those ideas or concepts? And then we'll go on to the next part of the mission of service to humanity. So are people able to enter in? Are you seeing it on your? You say yes, okay, good. So okay, so casteism and racism causes differentiating feelings, social inequality, internalized racial inferiority. They divide humanity. There's internalized racial superiority and inferiority. It affects revolution. It's an example of geosentiment. It's devolving. It's clouding the mind. It promotes disunity. There's needed to be victory to overcome it. We need consciousness and struggle, and there's separation. So let me know when you're finished. I think we've got 14 people have responded, so you could take a couple more minutes. And if you type in someone else's word, then it'll maybe expand it if you've done the same thing. But and we'll be saving this, and I'll be sending out the link along with the different things I've been sharing tonight to everybody after the meeting. Okay. I encourage people to do a screenshot of this. And save that for yourself, but you can refer to it later.
How do you do a screenshot?
Oh, depends on what kind of computer you have. With a Mac computer, you do Command-Shift-4, and then it brings up like a little device, and then you hold down your mouse and you cover the screen until that you want to, and you let go, and it saves it as an image. If Windows computer, I'm not sure how to do that. Okay, we're done. Let's go on to the next question. Let's see. So now you can enter keywords here. Is everyone seeing the second section? Okay. Are people being able to enter in things here, or does this take some more thought? Okay, there's development, exploitation, demeaning labor, downtrodden, artificial divisions, lack of empathy, exploitation, unequal access, resource conflicts, divisiveness, universal outlook, antiquated, downtrodden, community antiquated, privilege, inequality, repression, haves and have-nots, resource conflicts, universal outlook, the combination of things that are overcoming those things and things that are caused by the existence of racism and casteism. Any more? A few more coming in here. Has anyone been able to do a screenshot? If you had, hold on to it. That might be helpful when we come back to the search. Okay, are you ready for me to go on? Okay. Let's screenshot myself. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to the electronic edition. And going back to searching. What are some key words you think that you remember that I would like me to search on from what we just saw on the screen? Things that stood out for you.
Inferiority and superiority.
Ah, okay. So let me give you a clue here. Okay. All right, so 219 searches, and it's bringing up inferiority. Oh, you know what? If I change that, get rid of the F, then it'll bring up inferiority and superiority. Yes, 380 matches. So there's 380 places where superiority and inferiority. So clearly, and they're usually connected to the word complex. So PR Sarkar talks about one of the foundations of casteism and racism is the superiority and inferiority complex. And they function internally. You know, they're great obstacles to our spiritual progress. Feeling superior to others, feeling inferior are both great obstacles. And in the sort of the language of looking at racism or internalized racism, these complexes are the internalized aspects of racism and casteism. And changing the external aspects is never sufficient, because if we don't look at the roots and on a psychological level, then we're missing a lot, missing the key. Okay, And I'll come back to looking at all the different searches, and I'll show you how I use these searches, in a study circle, and then I'll make it clear. But you can see how much depth of material there is. But if we put in, say, racism, give an example, it's only 8 matches. So if you started off by just searching on racism, you say, well, he doesn't really talk about it. Well, actually, if you understand the foundations of racism, as both the internal aspects of it, complex superiority, inferiority complexes, and social and economic and political and cultural, you'll realize that PR Sarkar was talking about the more radical approach in terms of looking at the origins of these very harmful and defective, systems and ideas that are affecting us for humans for centuries, if not much longer than that. What would be some of the other keywords that came up around, obstacles on the level of the society, on the service to humanity?
Exploitation.
Exploitation, okay. $826 matches and 151 documents. So it's very powerful that PR Sarkar talked about all kinds of exploitation, economic exploitation in Bengal, exploitation in pseudoculture, various forms of exploitation, socioeconomic, just so many discourses that were really focused on exploitation. And what's the sentiment? There's a positive sentiment that Sarkar talks about connected to exploitation. The people may not think of it as a positive sentiment. What would that be? People might be familiar with, or you could figure it out. You're looking at half of it already. Well, what if we put in anti-exploitation? There's a fewer ones, but one of the key is Sarkar talks that anti-exploitation is a positive sentiment, and that any form of revolution, if it doesn't have anti-exploitation as being a key element to it, it can't be effective. We can't just say, oh, we're universal spiritualists and we're loving everybody and we're just kind of like peace and love and we'll change everything. PR Sarkar says that we have to both be, that spiritual, loving, compassionate beings, and we need to understand exploitation and be firmly against that. So rather than thinking that if we're anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-classist, those are all positive sentiments. Ending all different varieties of exploitation are very important and powerful. And any movement for revolution is a combination, successful, it needs to be a combination of the anti-exploitation sentiment and something more universal. We're all in this together. Humanity is one. We're all one human family. But combined with, we want to end all the kinds of exploitation. All right. Shiva, you had a question?
Yes, with all these different categories of people that are historically oppressed, I was trying to look up queer and transgender.
Yep.
And the only hit I got were 2 on queer. And it really has no connection to what we nowadays think of.
Sure.
The LGBTQ plus movement. It refers to about rice, different kinds of rice or whatever. I didn't really read a lot of detail, but
well,
how should we go about looking
probably,
for
given that Baba's writings were from 1955 to 1990, and the word queer wasn't being used very commonly in the world, especially not in India. And also his discourses on gender and the biopsychology really talk about these things a lot, but he's speaking it from the level of yoga practices, biopsychology, yoga psychology. There's many, there's actually, if you send me an email, I can send you a link to a presentation by Sister Joshna talking about what you're asking about in much greater detail, researching Baba's writings about this. So again, it's the same. You're not going to find words that we're using commonly now to refer to different aspects of society. You need to look at some of the context of when he was writing. But once you begin to explore the depths of the ideas, you realize that those concepts apply to so many things. It's just that they're in a he's sort of writing for the ages. That's my feeling, is that they're as more relevant today than they were in the 1950s when he was talking about many of these things. People were like, it was unusual for someone to be talking about ending capitalism in the 1950s in India. So, okay. I would like to show you how I explored over time. I built up. When you do a searches, this is the saving part. See the symbol up here, the house with the S. Those are your saved searches or your recent searches, and these are the ones we just did tonight. And these are the ones that I saved because much of the Baba's writings about racism are understood in the context of caste, overcoming caste and casteism. There's a huge number. These are the number of documents. The number of references is many more. So I will be sending you a screenshot of these saved searches, because where I found that I had the most success at really helping develop a much more comprehensive view of PR Sarkar's writings. And the other thing that I did is that because everything has a date in it, you can search on the discourses in chronological order and see each year when they were given. And so when you're saving documents, and if you put in the name of the document, the discourse, the year, you begin to see that, oh, maybe in 1957, PR Sarkar was talking about all these issues that he talked about at the end of his life, already in the first few years of his work. And so there's a consistency. He just developed it further and further over the years in greater depth. So these are
sorry, can you clarify that? I wasn't sure how you searched the year.
Okay, if we go here into discourses, see the top here says alphabetical list or chronological list. You click on the chronological, it shows you all the years here. Some things that they don't have a date, but then beginning in 1955, you can see the evolution of society. What's the aim of humanity? These are the names of the discourses given. And you click on them, it'll take you right to that. So what is the aim of humanity? Let's see, talking about it from a very spiritual level. But yeah, I mean, you can spend lifetime exploring all of the writings of PR Sarkar, but it helps to think about his mission and his purpose, and how that affects our lives and our society, and then use those impacts and those kind of internal aspects and the principles behind them, and and look at those as search terms. Okay, so if I go back to the, so does that answer the question about the chronological, how to use it? Okay. So again, this is my list of search terms. Now I'm going to go to a different sharing. After I did these things in the context, I was about a year and a half ago, I organized a study circle with about 6 or 8 friends looking at overcoming casteism and racism based on the teachings of PR Sarkar. So I'm going to see if I can have that up here. Okay. Nope. I'm going to stop sharing and pull that up separately and then share the screen. Okay. Okay. Screen. All right. Are you seeing on the screen now? This is, and I'm only going to show, not going to show all of this. I mean, because I'm going to be sending the link to this. This is a Google slideshow that put together the research done by all the people listed here: Chandravati, Amala, Vishala, Vivek, Ananta, Ashwita, and myself in the fall of 2020. And we were using, I put together documents with the keywords expanded, maybe 50 words around them, on the different topics related to racism and casteism that I was showing you. And then we use that in exploring that. So let me show you slides. We used the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Henderson as a resource, very valuable resource. It was published in August of 2020, and it was really talking about casteism and racism as being just like twins, brother and sister, whatever. And that, casteism is about the bones and racism is about the skin. And that it's a very powerful book. One section in there, one whole section was called 8 Pillars of Caste. And we used that as a framework for our study circle. And we looked at these 8 pillars, and each of us took an evening and researched the writings of PR Sarkar along with the chapter in the book from Isabel Henderson. And then we put together, slides and for discussion with all of us. And these were, again, the 8 pillars of caste: divine will and the laws of nature, heritability, endogamy, which has to do with who can marry who, who can be a partner with whom, purity versus pollution, occupational hierarchy, the kind of dehumanization and stigma, terror as enforcement, cruelty as a means of control, and inherent superiority versus an inherent inferiority. So these are, powerful, a powerful way of looking at, racism and casteism. And she goes in great depth in the book, but it was especially valuable for us to look at. I'll show you.
It's
Also,
Isabel Wilkerson, not Isabel Henderson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Isabel Wilkerson. I'm not sure why I said that. It was written properly, wasn't it on the screen?
It was written incorrectly on the
Or
screen.
incorrectly. Okay, I will correct that. Yes, sorry about that. All right, so this was one first pillar. In her book, she talks about this, how in India, they talk about how God created the caste system. And she refers to this quote about the Brahmins came out of the mouth, Kshatriyas were born of the arms, and Vaishyas came out of the trunk, and Shudras were born out of the feet, as saying, this is how they justify casteism. Well, PR Sarkar also refers to the same quote, and he explains it, saying that this supreme entity, this supreme consciousness, Param Brahma, belongs to all, and the nearest and dearest one. So in this quote, sort of denying that, So in this sloka, he's saying that the Vipras, the intellectuals, will come out of the mouth of the creator. The warriors, Kshatriyas, come out of the hands of the creator. The Kappas come out of the thighs. The Shudras come out of his feet. I said, well, if that's true, I'd say that the Shudras, the workers, are the greatest because everyone longs to touch the feet of the supreme consciousness. That's the metaphor in India. So if that's the case, then they should be the most holy. Of course, in India, the Shudras or even the untouchables are the lowest caste. So basically saying that this is basically completely wrong, and it's a but it became very powerful. And India is one of the foundations of casteism, yes. So he said, and then this is given in 1957, a discourse called Ananda Marga, which was the spiritual path he created, a revolution. He said, those who are to build a society of Ananda Marga are not mere idealists and moralists, but they're a group of classless, casteless, practical people who not only preach and meditate on the principles of classlessness, but actually practice those principles so as to be a fit member of any classes of the world and based on their individual capacity. So in this section, if you're casteless and classless, that's to become that is a practical people. We have to figure out, how do we overcome casteism? How do we overcome racism? How do we both at an internal level and on a societal level? So he talked about, in the book Caste, she talks about Hitler and the whole Nazism, and which was inspired from racism in the United States, and the Jim Crow era became an inspiration for the Germans, and then the connections with the caste system. And so, of course, Sarkar was basically saying that, on a practical level, he encouraged universal marriages, people of all blending of all societies, all races, all cultures, all countries, and that we're all one universal family. And said no race is absolutely free from blending, because everywhere there's blending, and there cannot and should not be an inferiority or superiority complex in anyone. Okay. So, and then the casteism is especially you think about in the United States, about during the era of the Jim Crow, purity versus pollution, in terms of all these black codes, all these things separating people. And if someone did something to step out of line, there would be tremendous force applied against them, violence, not just the laws, but also the physical violence, lynchings and massacres, and just great harm that was caused. And the whole idea of purity was really completely distorted. Okay, and then so PR Sarkar talked about a whole vision of changing society, and I'm not going to go into that, but that was presented by one of the Charya Vivek presented that as in one of our evenings, looking at about revolutionaries, evolution and revolution. So I'm not going to go into all the depth of this. I'm just going to give you kind of like a feeling of what we did, because you'll be able to see this. We don't have enough time to go. Everything can be discussed in great length. Ananta did a presentation on dehumanization and stigma, and one of the keys, again, to understanding Sarkar's approach to overcoming casteism and racism is based in his philosophy of neo-humanism. And in neo-humanism, which is expanding the love for humans to all beings, all creation, in fact, he says that in society, in our society today and for a long time, there's been two principles that have been, in great conflict, and it's a polarity that is important to understand. And the first is the principle of selfish pleasure, which rests on dogma, which is don't thinking don't think out of the box. And all the social, economic, and geographical forces that are guided by dogma. And this is based upon the whole idea of selfishness and self-interest. And if you read a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram Kendi, the author of that book, said, what were the source of all of these racist policies? He said, is it prejudice? No, he said, no, actually, I would look at it in depth. It's self-interest. The foundation of harmful practices come from self-interest. And self-interest taken to the expanded is Sarkar's idea of the principle of selfish pleasure as causing tremendous harm in society. Here's an example of Ayn Rand, who's kind of like a right wing sees her as kind of like a patron saint, but her whole teachings were all about selfishness. And then the most powerful part is the principle of social equality. We're all moving toward that supreme consciousness, and everyone is an expression of that divine. So if we imagine that we're all moving together, and the idea is to be seeing the supreme consciousness of the divine within everyone in the whole creation, that is the foundation for seeing social equality is the naturally flows from that. And PR Sarkar used the phrase unite the moralists. Well, if you look deeply what he's speaking about, the moralist means those people who are motivated by the principle of social equality. And there's millions of people on the planet who are lives are dedicated towards that. So again, building anything on a humanistic lines requires a foundation, a real love for humanity. A truly benevolent society will never come into being under the leadership of those who are solely concerned with profit and loss. Where love is paramount, the question of personal loss or gain does not arise. The basic ingredient for building a human society is simply love. How are we doing on time? I don't have a...
It's 8:52.
Okay, I've got 8 minutes. Maybe it would take 5 minutes longer because we started 5 minutes afterwards. Maybe people can stay 5 minutes longer. Okay, so, all right, we just briefly go through these. And then this was a very powerful part of her book, was talking about how the caste system was in the United States, and the racism was enforced through tremendous cruelty and terror. She said the only way to keep a entire group of sentient beings in an artificially fixed place beneath all others and beneath their own talents is with violence and terror, psychological and physical, to preempt resistance before it can be imagined. Evil asks little of the dominant caste other than to sit back and do nothing. All it needs from the bystanders is their silent complicity. Right, Isabel Wilkerson, you can see the names here correctly. So again, PR Sarkar talked about human society is one and indivisible. So if the origin of all human beings is coming from one, he has this, he quotes this poet, Rabindranath Tagore, a very famous poet from India, actually a Nobel Prize winner. Mad with violence is the world. Cruel are the battles which rage each day. Crooked indeed are the ways of the world, bound by the noose of greed. So below that, he talks about how the various races and countries have been plagued with clashes and conflicts due to petty, selfish interests. Every house is shaken with conflict. How many wars have plagued the world? How much blood has flowed into the rivers of the world? Now, can we truly say that there is no difference between people? Where's the unity which creates a common bond among human beings? To get the proper answer, one has to go deep into human psychology, because true unity lies in the realm of the human mind. So, and then the last pillar is superiority or inferiority, and this of course ties in greatly to all of Baba's PR Sarkar's writings on overcoming complexes, superiority and inferiority. And an important, I read something I found in his writings on on complexes and neo-humanism. He says that one of the pillars of neo-humanism is rationality, using the clear thinking mind to look at the nature of all kinds of exploitation in our society. But he said it's not possible to have a rational mind if we are affected by complexes of superiority or inferiority, or he also uses fear or defeatist. Those complexes make it impossible for us to think rationally. So much of what we're seeing in the society, dogmas, fear, insecurities, things are being created. They're based around sentiments of inferiority and superiority. And then many people who act out in sort of the ways of, say, white supremacy, you could describe that as a superiority complex. Well, actually, it has a foundation of inferiority complex because of so many things that have happened in our society that cause people to be harmed. And capitalism in particular, or religious dogma, make people feel inferior. Then the shadow side of that is people gravitate towards something that says, oh, you're better than other people, you're superior. You may be poor, but at least you're white. And so that's how people who, their class interests were the same as people who were enslaved, but because they were told that they were superior based on their color, they did not see the common humanity. So we can't think clearly when we are guided by superiority and inferiority. So this is the quote. In this universe, all entities are divine. Only people have to realize it. Nobody is helpless or alone in this universe. We have mundane, super mundane, and spiritual relationships with this universe. So it is the bounden duty of the human beings to expand their mental arena, because basically all finite entities have the inherent want of universal pervasion, meaning expansion. Their goal is the supreme entity who is free from limitations. Human beings want to expand themselves, is expanding our hearts and our minds, so much that they will go beyond the fetters of limitations. There cannot be and should not be an inferiority or superiority complex in anybody. Those who preach individual racial superiority are committing sins. They're going against human dharma. Like earth, air, and water, dharma is common to one and all. Human beings will have to become one with the universal entity. So that's probably, and then come back to this was the last slide in that presentation. These were, again, some of the key terms I shared with our group that if you search on love for humanity or concepts, universalism, caste, castelessness, complexes, disparities, dogma, pseudoculture, self-interest, exploitation, anti-exploitation, suppression, repression, oppression, and rationality. You'll get a tremendous wealth of and depth of material, and seeing how Sarkar gave not only ideas, but also practices. We haven't talked about all the spiritual practices that he gave, and collective processes that are actually processes to overcome feeling of separateness, feelings of inferiority or superiority, overcoming dogma. Again, these are very large topics, but I think I'll stop the share here.